All right, here we go on a March Madness Sunday morning. I'm Brian Feldman, and this is Outta Line. We are here live in the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio every Sunday morning at 8 on Fox Sports Radio, 98.9 FM and 1340 AM, Las Vegas, the flagship of the Vegas Golden Knights, and sister station of Raiders Nation Radio. Also here is social media director Spencer the Wiz Ostrovsky.
Nobody beats the Wiz. Nobody beats the Wiz.
And producer Chris Magnum Chapman, who aside from producing and chiming in on a number of shows at Lotus Broadcasting, also serves as the locker room reporter for the Vegas Golden Knights radio network and the UNLV football pre-game show host on our other sister station, ESPN Radio Las Vegas. We're also streaming on the LV Sports Network, and you can watch the show on Facebook Live and YouTube. The page is called Outta Line. That's OUTTALINE. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at OuttaLineFoxLV. And since we are live, your calls and questions are welcome. The Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio line is 702-876-1340.
Hi, this is Bubby, and it's time for What's on Tap.
On Tap, brought to you by title sponsor Residential Bancorp. Whether purchasing a new home or refinancing the home you already own, Residential Bancorp is the company to turn to for all of your home financing needs. Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time. Call 702-964-5720 to get information on all of the home financing options currently available in Nevada. On Tap, after a bad loss and a couple days of rest, the Western Conference leading Vegas Golden Knights are back at it this afternoon. We'll talk about the Raiders and Jimmy G. As always, March Madness is living up to the title. And speaking about March Madness, the West Regionals will be in Las Vegas this week. Plus, if you are craving Major League Baseball, you have one more chance to see it live in Las Vegas this afternoon. That's what's on tap. If you are looking to buy a home or to refinance the home you currently own, contact Residential Bancorp, the company that is funding America one neighborhood at a time. Call 702-964-5720 for details on current home financing options available in the state of Nevada. And guys, it's been a hell of a couple of weeks. I just had my makeup surgery, Chris, on Thursday, and here I am, man, a lot better in shape than I was the last time I went into a hospital or under anesthesia. So at least I'm happy to be back. All I will say is, man, everyone out there, if you've never had one, which I had never before this year, drink a lot of water. And what I'm talking about is a kidney stone. You don't want them. Right now, everything's good except going to the bathroom, I should say, urinating is still an adventure. Sorry to say that on the air, but it is an adventure. And what I'm saying is every 5 minutes, it feels like you got to go. When you go, you start to go, and it feels like somebody kind of gives you a quick rabbit punch in the side. That's what it's like for a few days. Hopefully that's going to change real quickly here. But anyways, Vegas Golden Knights, man, it's been just a magical ride this season. The way they started the season, super high expectations from Bill Foley, Kelly McCrimmon. They've talked about it all season long that this is the year they expect this team to really compete for a Stanley Cup. And the Vegas Golden Knights aren't disappointing. They're tied with the most points in the Western Conference with 90. They're tied with LA's also got 90, but they've got one game in hand on LA. They'll make up that game today as they play host to the Columbus Blue Jackets. But the Vegas Golden Knights have exceeded expectations, I think, this year, especially the way they really started to fizzle right before the All-Star break. And everyone said, this break's going to be great for them. You want to believe that. But, come on, is it cliche-ish? A little break's going to do them good. In this case, the break has done them amazingly. They've gotten points in all but 3 games since they've been back from the All-Star break. They have been the hottest team in the National Hockey League. You had a knock on Jonathan Marchessault. He wasn't scoring goals. He had kind of disappeared after really having a strong start. Well, Jonathan's now over 20 goals, I should say, again this season. And by the way, Marchie is living up to his name because in the month of March, he is the leading scorer of the Vegas Golden Knights. 5 goals, 10 total points, and he has really stepped up when they've needed him. And again, Chris, I can't talk enough about the moves that were made pre trading deadline. those moves, we didn't think a lot of them. You thought, hey, they're decent. How good are they going to be? How good is Barbashev going to be? How good is Bluger going to be? You wonder with these guys how good they're going to be. And they've come in, and you look at this last road trip, all of them had 3 points. Well, I should say the 2 of them had 3 points in this last road trip. If you throw in Dorofeyev, how do you say his name again? Dorofeyev.
Pavel Dorofeyev.
You throw him in there. He also had 2 goals and 1 assist as he comes in, as some players like William Carrier injured right now. He comes in and picks up the slack. All of them with 3 points on the 4-game road trip. And how about Jonathan Quick? On the road trip, let's disregard the Calgary game Thursday night. 3-0, 1.97 goals against average, and a 94% save percentage for Jonathan Quick, who has come here and done exactly what their highest hopes would have been, at least to this point, for Jonathan Quick. Right now, disregarding again the Calgary game, which I think was kind of a stopgap game. I had a feeling it was going to be the Philadelphia Flyers game last Tuesday was going to be the game where they kind of fell apart, just because so much road, so many games back to back, and then they go to they come home against Calgary. You think, wow, they got through that road trip. They had a day off. They get to come back to T-Mobile Arena, and they're going to play well. They didn't play well from the jump. They weren't out of the game till the end. But 7-2, a lopsided victory against the Flames. But throwing that one out, Jonathan Quick has done everything this team could have expected of him. And the players they picked up in free agent, or I should say prior to the trading deadline, Chris, they have done everything and more you could have expected of these guys. They've really fit in well.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I really did not. I had the conversation with someone the other day at the game, because Ivan Barbashev is very noticeable. And the conversation basically went like, you know what? I would be lying if I told you I watched a lot of Ivan Barbashev when he was with the St. Louis Blues. He's a good player. Like, he fits very well with what this team needed. I think he was the kind of player that they needed, because to me, I watch him, and he's a skilled player. And he's a guy who's capable of playing on that top line. He can play in your top 6, but he's also got a little bit of a mean streak. And I feel like this team has been missing a player like that. And I want to say since year 1, since they had Eric Holla, who was a top 6 guy. I mean, Eric Holla, I think, scored like 29 goals that year. But Eric Holla was a guy who played on the edge, right? Like, he played with a little bit of meanness in his game. And I don't think Barbashev is as skilled or as good of a player as Timo Meier, but Timo Meier is that type of player, right? He plays with a little bit of an edge. He plays angry, and that's what Ivan Barbashev brings to the team. He can deliver some big hits, and I think that's the kind of player that this team needed, a skilled player who has the capability to go out there and knock you on your ass. And Ryan Reeves could go out and knock you on your ass, but Ryan Reeves is not a top line player. He's a bottom 3 guy, and that's not a knock on him. It's just who he is.
You typically don't count on a guy that is able to mix it up, that is a guy that goes in the corners, as a guy that's going to put the puck in. And this is a double-digit goal scorer.
He's a guy who, when you go into the corner, you're looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
And I think that's, when they acquired him, Kelly McCrimmon said that they'd been scouting him for a long time. They watched a lot of his games. They knew going into the season that he was a guy that they wanted. And I do believe that they are going to re-sign him at the end of the year.
I think so too, Chris. And I think also with Barbashev, one of the things that you get, on top of him being somewhat intimidating in the fact that he can put the puck in the net, he is a guy built for the playoffs.
Yes.
And that is what you want when you go into the trading deadline. You look for guys who is going to make this team better and who is going to be able to rise and elevate their game for the postseason. Barbashev is a guy that does it. And Bluger, too. Bluger's a guy that's not going to get you a lot of points. He's a blue-collar guy that just gets the job done. A guy that's going to be on your 3rd or 4th line, that is going to be in the right place at the right time, going to get the job done. And more than anything else, Chris, he's not a guy that leaves you hanging out to dry.
Yeah, Bluger reminds me a lot of Pierre-Edouard Bellemare.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a guy who, and again, he's a player that they have been missing since they let Bellemare walk after year 3. He was a guy who I think he again targeted. I liked him in Pittsburgh because I kind of like the grinders, and Bluger is a bit of a grinder. he's a guy. What I love about his game and why I compare him to Pierre-Edouard Bellemare is he's a guy who's going to win you draws. Most importantly, in the when you need someone to win you a faceoff, he's a guy who can go out there and do it. He's really, really good on the penalty kill, which is very similar to what Pierre-Edouard Bellemare was. You're not going to get a ton of offensive production, but when he chips in, you know it's really, really important. And I feel like he just fits that mold of what a fourth line center. Yeah. You knew the Golden Knights had gotten a really good player when it's funny because when they drafted Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, my cousin is a Philadelphia Flyers fan. And I asked him, I said, hey, what can you tell me about this guy? He goes, everybody in Philadelphia loves him. If you are a beloved player in Philadelphia, there's a reason why you are a beloved player in Philadelphia. When Teddy Bluger was acquired by the Golden Knights, the reaction on social media was similar. He was a beloved player in Pittsburgh for all the right reasons. And, you know, to be a fourth line player and be really well loved and liked in the city you play, right? Because a lot of times those guys can be scapegoats. But to be the guy who is beloved when you're in that role, you're obviously really, really good at that role. And Teddy Bluger fits that mold. He is a player who just fits. He fills a void that this team hasn't had, or a void that this team has needed to fill for a couple of years. And look, it's not a knock on any of the other guys who play fourth line, because clearly the fourth line has been really good for this team all year. What amazes me is right now, the guys who started the season on the fourth line, they're all hurt. Colasar, Carrier, and Nick Waugh. So it's funny how they've lost one of the most probably. Look, I'd be lying if I told you I knew every fourth line in the NHL.
It's a productive.
But it is a very productive fourth line, and my guess would be one of the more productive fourth lines in the NHL. They're missing all those guys right now.
Well, you know,
and they're still playing well.
No, and Bruce Cassidy shows that by having the confidence in them and to show them his appreciation of them is he starts the fourth line a lot. You don't see a lot of teams do that.
Well,
Bruce Cassidy does that.
Pete DeBoer used to do that.
He did it as well. Yeah,
Gerard Gallant. So
it's kind of been a thing here in Vegas,
yeah,
where the fourth line goes out first.
I think it's cool. You know?
It's an appreciation thing. But Chris, going back to what you said, about Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and again, just now about Teddy Bluger, you're talking about two guys that were getting praises from a state like Pennsylvania, and it is a blue collar state. And in order to be a beloved guy, when you play for a Philadelphia or a Pittsburgh team, be it a football or a hockey team, they are expecting to have a blue collar mentality. And both those guys that you mentioned have that type of mentality. They're guys that get down, they're going to annoy the hell. Guys, when they say guys that get under your skin, that was a Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and that is a Teddy Bluger. They're guys, they might not be the toughest guys in the NHL, but they're going to get under your skin, and you know what? They're not going to back down.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of player that as you go forward and you head to the postseason, that the Vegas Golden Knights desperately needed. I think, like I said, fan of Kelly McCrimmon or not, he did a hell of a job before the trading deadline getting these two guys. And again, the afterthought, and to get him for a song, to get a guy like Jonathan Quick. And again, yes, Jonathan Quick has led a couple of cheapies in. He's 37 years old and has so many miles on those tires. It's ridiculous. And
well, he made some big saves early on.
But that's the point, is he still has that ability, Chris. And again, you go to a new town where your old town has kind of said, okay, you've done all you can for us here. We're done with you. You go somewhere new. And again, I'm beating this horse to the Elmer Glue Factory, but we saw it with Marc-Andre Fleury when he came from Pittsburgh. Marc-Andre Fleury had the quietest chip I've ever seen on someone's shoulders. He wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't emphasize it, but you could tell this guy was playing with a purpose. He was playing with a chip on his shoulder, and he had to prove to everyone, I'm still one of the best in the game. Well, Jonathan Quick is also one of the best in the history of this game. What he did in 2012 is unprecedented. It's magical. I don't know, just like the Vegas Golden Run's inaugural season of 2017, I don't know that it can ever be copied. I don't know the run Jonathan Quick had for the LA Kings in 2012 could ever be copied, because it was so unbelievable that it was a mediocre hockey team that barely made the playoffs and a goaltender that just decided, you know what? I'm going to say no. No more pucks are getting in my net. And he did it for 4 series in a run to the Stanley Cup championship.
Yeah, beat my New Jersey Devils.
Sure did. And I will never forget
beat
that
the hell
run,
out of them.
because before that run, Chris, I had no idea who the hell Jonathan Quick was. I've known who he was since then, and a guy you always need to pay attention to. And believe me, with him between the pipes of all the guys they have, yes, I definitely believe Logan Thompson has gotten respect around the NHL from last year and this year going to the All-Star game. Laurent Brossoit proved to us coming back from the hip surgery that he can still play at this level and play really well. For God's sakes, Aiden Hill, light a little fire under that guy's ass, bring in a Jonathan Quick, and all of a sudden he'll give you 50 saves in a night. We saw Aiden Hills has that type of capability. However, any one of those 3 guys, when you tell an opponent, this is who's in net against you in the playoffs, okay, so you know you're going against tonight? Jonathan Quick. Guys, we got to sit down and talk about this. It's a whole different conversation because of the respect this man has earned throughout his tenure in the National Hockey League. And that is why I thought he was such a big presence to bring to this team, not just for what he can do between the pipes, but what he does mentally to opponents and also the goaltenders he's playing with. Everyone feels we need to play better when Jonathan Quick is on the ice. That is reputation. And at 37, he still has enough gas left in the tank, like I have said, to give them some great games and some great saves. And we've already seen it in his short time here with the Vegas Golden Knights. Again, A+ for what they did this year prior to the trading deadline. Again, the number 1 point getter right now with the LA Kings in the Pacific, actually in the entire Western Conference, also in the Pacific Division. And there's some great teams in the Eastern Conference, and it's going to be awfully tough getting by them. But I think the Vegas Golden Knights have as good of a chance of getting out of the Western Conference as any team in the National Hockey League in the Western Conference. It's going to be whoever ends up winning the East. I mean, Boston is just, it's a juggernaut, 109 points. They're sick how good they've been this year. There's 4 or 5 teams in the East that could win the Stanley Cup over any team in the West. But the Vegas Golden Knights, I think, are one of the premier teams in the Western Conference.
Well, yeah, their schedule, their wins over the Eastern Conference. When you look at what their record is against the Bostons and the Torontos, look, they split with Boston. They won in Boston. They swept Toronto. They swept Carolina. They swept Tampa. They split with the Devils. They're a good team. And what amazes me is they're a good team without their heart and soul. And when I say that, I mean without Mark Stone.
Yeah.
The job that, look, I know Jim Montgomery.
43 games, Chris, and he's still the 4th leading goal scorer on this team. And he only played in 43 games out of 70.
Jim Montgomery in Boston is going to win the Jack Adams Award. I don't think there's any debate about that. But Bruce Cassidy, for the job that he has done with the amount of injuries that this team has had from basically the beginning of November on, for the 2nd year in a row, this is a team that's dealt with injuries. Now, they haven't been as bad as they were a year ago, but look, there was a stretch where they played 5 goalies in 15 games.
Yes.
Or 15 days. 15 days.
And for a team that goes into the season with the goaltender being your biggest question mark,
yeah.
to be the number 1 team with only less than 15 games left to go in the season, number 1 team in the conference, you got to give some credit to coaching there.
Yeah,
no question about
Bruce
it.
Cassidy and his staff, John Stevens and Sean Burke and Ryan, so they certainly deserve the credit for a good job. And the funny thing is, I don't think Bruce Cassidy will really, like, if you approached him and asked him, like, when the nominations come out for Jack Adams, and I'm guessing he will be one of the finalists. He absolutely should be. I think Jim Montgomery's got it locked up, though. I mean, look, the Bruins are a steamroller.
It's
right
unbelievable.
Now. So I think if you ask Bruce Cassidy about it, I don't think he would be highly. I think he would pass a lot of the praise on to the players. Because he says it right in pressers. We can make up the game plan, but once the players get on the ice, it's up to them. And that goes for wins and losses. When the team doesn't play well, that's on them, and Cassidy will take the blame. But when the team does well, I don't see Bruce Cassidy saying, "Well, yeah, I did this right and I did that right." It's the players. He talked about in the past. He's talked about the way that some of these guys, a lot of them take losing personally. And that's a good trait. Like Zach Whitecloud the other night, I asked him about his goal. He didn't want to talk about his goal. He was pissed that they lost. And to me, that's the sign of a leadership. It's a leadership trait by Zach Whitecloud, because he was like, look, I made a nice play. I don't care. We lost. That's all that mattered to him, is that they lost the game. And I don't think he's the only guy in the locker room who feels that way. Like I look at Alec Martinez, and I know he's been around the league a long time, and he's obviously had the highest of the highs in the game. But I still think he takes losing personally. Like I feel like I'm sure he's gotten to the point in his career where he can decompress pretty quickly. But in those moments after that game, my guess, and I don't know this for a fact because I don't know him very well, but I think he takes it personally, just based on a few of the conversations that me and him had. That's a leadership trait. I think Brady McNabb takes losing personally.
No, and Brady McNabb, it's funny because Bruce Cassidy always refers to Brady McNabb, Nabber, as a guy that, you cannot look at what Brady McNabb brings you on paper, or you are going to completely miss what this player brings you. A leadership role. He's active in the locker room. I mean, he is the quiet enforcer, and also a guy that will light you up if you don't have your head up on the ice. Brady McNabb protects his players. He is the epitome of a team player and a team defenseman. I love him. And, and I also like what you said, Chris. I do believe that that this team is built around the tenacity of a guy like Bruce Cassidy and the way that he thinks. He has mixed up lines. He continues to try different things. And the one thing the Vegas Golden Knights continue to do is win. Now, again, 69 games under wrap. That leaves 13 games to go in the regular season. Chris, I got to say, looking at the schedule, looking ahead, it is a tough road to haul, but I think the Vegas Golden Knights hold on, find a way to win the Pacific Division over the LA Kings. I think anyone else, I know the Oilers are like 4 games back. They've got a couple of games against them still, or 4 points back, but I think the Golden Knights find a way to come out of this division, win the Pacific Division, and Dallas, right behind them with 89 points. They do have a game in hand on the Stars. The Stars have played 70 games, but I think it's going to come down to, and I think the Golden Knights, it is crucial for them to come out and win the Pacific Division, or I should say the Pacific Division, and to win the Western Conference in general. Home ice advantage, I think, will pay dividends, even though I know earlier in the season, the big talk was how much they were struggling at T-Mobile Arena. I think when you get to the postseason, I'll tell you what,
it's a different animal.
In Detroit for years, seeing postseason games, and it's exciting, and the hairs stand up on your arms, and the place gets loud. But I'll tell you right now, I have never seen an atmosphere, especially in 2017, 2018 season, like the postseason at T-Mobile Arena. It is electric. It's a big stadium, and the noise reverberates really well. And I think going to the postseason and playing, getting home ice advantage throughout at least the conference finals would be gigantic for the Vegas Golden Knights this year. I think it's something they need to strive for, and I do think they're going to get it. You think it's a realistic possibility for them?
Well, it's going to be a battle, and I think we will have a better idea, I think, when we turn these mics on next week, because they've got Columbus today, early start, 1:00, and then you hit the road for Western Canada. You've got one more game with the Canucks. You finish your season series with Calgary, and then you go to Edmonton for one last time, hopefully. Brian,
you got that home series against Edmonton.
Yeah, so you finish. You have Columbus today, and then 8 of the remaining, I believe, 10 games or 11 or 12 games are against the Pacific Division. Only one of those teams stink, and that's the San Jose Sharks, who you play on the 30th. Other than that, Brian, and Vancouver. Okay, so 2 of them are against non-playoff teams. 6 of your remaining 13 games are against playoff teams from
fighting for position right now.
Yeah. So, and then you've got the other games with the Minnesota Wild and the Nashville Predators and Dallas Stars. So 2 of those 3 teams currently are in the playoffs, and one of them kind of threw the towel, and yet they're still kind of hovering around, at least with a mathematic possibility of making the playoffs. So, I mean, you've got a really tough stretch of games to end the season. Columbus, you should beat them. There's no excuse. If you go out and lay an egg today against Columbus, that's inexcusable. This is a team who has been battered on this West Coast swing.
I think today, Chris, I think you are really going to see a mighty Golden Knights team.
Today should probably be one of those 6-1.
Even with Yuri Patera in net, which I
Yeah.
think he will be today. I agree with you. I think today is the day the Vegas Golden Knights, they look back at the Calgary
It's a game they should flex their muscle.
They're going to show the Calgary game was a fluke. Hey, guys, we just got back from a 4-game vicious road trip. We came back against Calgary. We weren't ready mentally to play that game. By the third period, we ran out of gas. The gas tank is full now. We're getting ready to hit the road. We know this is a team we have to beat and flex our muscles against, and I think we'll see them do that. I do look again for the Vegas Golden Knights to have a successful campaign this last month of the season and heading to the postseason. And who knows, the sky's going to be the limit for this team, at least as far as the Western Conference goes. I think it's going to be really, really tough for them to get by anybody. And I think anybody in the Western Conference to win against whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference, because the team that does come out of the Eastern Conference this year is going to be so battle tested. They are going to be playing against really, really good teams playing their best hockey. This is going to be one of the most exciting Stanley Cup playoffs on both ends that we've seen in a while, and I'm looking really forward to it. Well, let's quickly get over to the Bones and the National Football League, because some things happened this week, something I predicted a long time ago, and I'm not Nostradamus. I think anybody that was paying attention had a pretty good feeling that Jimmy Garoppolo was on the short list for the Las Vegas Raiders to replace Derek Carr and become their quarterback. We knew that Jarrett Stidham went off to Denver. They paid him $2 million to back up Russell Wilson this year. And, of course, we know Derek Carr is in New Orleans, hopefully for their sake, going to revive their team. But the guy that they're turning to is Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm going to bring Spencer in to talk about this, because I know Spence is his passion. He wasn't around to remember the glory days of the Raiders, even though the Raiders are the third most successful NFL franchise since the Super Bowl has been around. Spencer doesn't want to talk about any of that. He's about, what have you done for me lately? And lately they have done absolutely nothing for him. They've lost a couple of playoffs games in the past 5 or 6 years. And Spencer was a big Derek Carr detractor, wanted him gone. He got his wish. Talking to Spencer before the show, we talked a little bit. Spencer, of course, in the green room. But Spencer, a little bit before the show, said, I don't mind the Jimmy Garoppolo move. They didn't pay a lot of money for Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's, it's like replacing Derek Carr with Derek Carr, but for half the cost, where you can get other things. If you don't know about Garoppolo's contract, he signed a 3-year, $72,750,000 contract with the Las Vegas Raiders, including a $11.25 million sign-on bonus. $45 million is guaranteed for Jimmy G. And that is an awful lot of money to give Jimmy G, although, like Spencer said, based on quarterbacks today, it's not that much money. He is guaranteed as an average salary over the next 3 years of over $24 million. Spencer, is Jimmy G worth that much? And are the Raiders going to be improved offensively with Jimmy Garoppolo calling signals?
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be improved. I mean, I know they traded Darren Waller, who really hasn't even been available for the past 2 years, so I can't really comment too far on that. But I think they'll be about the same. But, we did talk about it before the show. You either pay $42 million a year for Derek Carr, or you get about the same production with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I think the offense is going to be, a tad bit different, because Derek Carr tended to throw the ball down the field a little bit more, than in past. But when you have Jimmy Garoppolo, he's more of that kind of methodical, short range kind of guy. And I think that you're going to see, Devontae Adams just run different routes, see him in different positions. They also signed Jacoby Myers. So I don't think they're going to see a dip in production at all. I think you might see a little bit more stability, but I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is the long-term answer. And I don't think they, assume that either. I think they're going to go after quarterback kind of later in the draft, not in the first round. They called up for the first overall pick, didn't like the asking price. They called Green Bay to ask about Aaron Rodgers. They didn't like the asking price. So I just think they're going the safe route. And truthfully, if you want the answer, I think they're going to take this year off. I think they're really gearing up for next year. They didn't go after Jordan Poyer aggressively. They didn't go after Jalen Ramsey aggressively. I just think that this team was so bad, and they had no drafting for the long time. They're not going to build this team through free agency. They're stocking up draft picks. I think they're going to end up trading back in this year's draft, not being too aggressive, and just seeing what they get next year. And this is the most exciting position the Raiders have been in my entire life, or I guess since 2003 when they went to the Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Spencer the Wiz Ostrowski, the new general manager for the Las Vegas
I'm
Raiders.
ready.
Hey, I like what you're saying, Spencer. I'm not going to disagree. I don't think anyone out there wants to hear that the Raiders are taking this year off, but Spencer's just talking reality. They are building for the future. What Jimmy G brings more than anything else is big game experience. And to me, that is gigantic. He's played in a few NFC championship games. He's played in a Super Bowl. This guy has played the game at the highest level in the biggest games, and that is going to make a difference. Yes, if you want to talk about the reasons, no, Jimmy G didn't do anything special. He had an unbelievable defense in San Francisco for the time that he played there. And when that defense was healthy, that team won football games. And Jimmy G was the cause of some of them. Jimmy G is a guy that is you don't want to count on to win you games with his arm. You want to count on Jimmy G to be a game manager, to let the skilled position players around him do their job, and you want the defense to definitely do their job, which is where the Raiders' focus needs to now be. They've got their quarterback, they've got their skilled positions. They still do need to fix up that offensive line a little bit, but if this Raiders team is going to be a team that competes down the road for an NFL championship, it is a team that is going to have to become better defensively. That's been the thing we've been screaming about for years. They thought last year bringing in Chandler Jones on the other side of Max Crosby was going to be a big win. It wasn't. Max Crosby's numbers dipped, and Chandler Jones was not nearly the player everyone thought he was going to be. Denzel Perryman, a big part of this team last couple of years, he's been hurt on and off, but he's definitely rejuvenated his career in Las Vegas. But they need a secondary, Chris. They need to develop the secondary. They need to get better players there. They need to be healthy. But again, if this team is going to win, it's not the offense that's going to win for this team. It's going to be the defense.
Well, that's the old Patriot way, right? Like for all the greatness that Tom Brady was, he always had a really good defense, right? Like Tom Brady, he put up good numbers, but like he wasn't like Dan Marino where he was just slinging the ball 40 yards downfield and a pop, right? Like there was a method to what Bill Belichick and his crew did, and it always started with the defense, right? That first Super Bowl they won wasn't because of Tom Brady. They didn't lose because of Tom Brady, but they won because of the defense. Even the second Super Bowl they won, I think it was against the Eagles. The defense showed up. Donovan McNabb did not show up. So I think with Jimmy G, I'll be honest, I think he's a guy who was unfairly kind of scapegoated as the reason why the 49ers didn't beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl that year. I always felt it was kind of crappy that he was the guy who was blamed for it. It's like, how about you just give credit to Kansas City for being a great team? But
well, Chris, you know what? I'm gonna real quickly before I say I do give Kansas City credit for being a great team. I don't hang that loss on Jimmy Garoppolo at all. But here's the deal. I blame that loss on Kyle Shanahan more than on Kansas City winning the game. They were running the ball effectively all game, and all of a sudden at the end, they decided to start throwing the football when they just needed to keep. Yeah. Why are you going away from the heritage?
It was the same thing with the Atlanta Falcons when they choked. They got away from what was working. But anyway, I think there's something to what Spencer said, and Raider fans probably, I think every fan, not just Raider fans, but I think every fan of teams go into seasons thinking that they can win the Super Bowl. The reality is this Raider team is not built to win a Super Bowl. They brought in Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels to build for a future. They didn't want a 1 year pop and then all of a sudden you're in salary cap hell and you never were able to get back to what you did year one. We've seen that multiple times in the NFL where a coach comes in and the team right away, they overachieve. And then all of a sudden they can't get back because they just don't have the players to do it. They can't sign the players. I think what we've seen is a mini demolition. Like it wasn't just a blow up, right? They didn't blow this whole thing up. They're methodically removing pieces and getting parts for the future. I think it's a bold move because I don't know how much of a time frame Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels are on. Like there were people calling for Josh McDaniels' job at the end of this year.
They still are. I'm calling for his job. Chris.
So well. That's not something I will do because I feel like you've got to be patient. And I think that there is a plan. And I don't think the plan was ever to try to win the Super Bowl year one with Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. I think the plan was always we're going to get Adams. and then we're going to let Carr go at the end of the season. I feel like that unless Carr had an unbelievable
No, I'm
season.
not, Chris. I'm not going to disagree with you, but I got to chime in because the thing is with Josh McDaniels is I said this all along. I say this to almost every coach that leaves New England. Yes, he's had a head coaching stint in Denver and what have you.
Yeah, no.
But I said this
totally
about every coach that has led.
I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going. They forget one thing in New England when they come.
They don't bring
They don't bring Belichick, who is the mind, the brains.
But
let's
be honest, Brian. Belichick hasn't. You look at Belichick's full body of work, and you take the Tom Brady years away from Bill Belichick.
No,
he's an average.
No,
coach.
I'm not going to disagree, but it's not average because I will go back. I will go back to what Bill Parcells said about him when he was the defensive coordinator of your Giants. Not your Giants. You're right. You're right. You're the Jets fan.
That's insulting.
Right. But hey, listen, what he said about the Giants is he said Bill Belichick, and this was shortly after we just saw what Buddy Ryan did in Chicago with the '86 defense. He said Bill Belichick is the best defensive mind in the history of the NFL, and the guy was a young man. It's like, well, God, it's hard to argue with Bill Parcells. Look who he is. But he was saying, wait till you get a load of how good of a defensive mind this guy is. And what you just said about the Patriots is an exact example of that, because every year, if you watch the Patriots throughout Tom Brady's tenure and since, they start off where their defense is in the middle of the road to the back half of the league. By the end of the season, every year, they're one of the top 5, the top 10 defenses in the league, because Bill Belichick is the best innovator there's ever been. He sees players, he realizes their strengths, and he plays and he designs defenses around the strength of his players and understands that about his players better than any coach I've ever seen.
But the key is
that's why their team, that's why their team every year seems to find their way to compete for a playoff spot, because Bill Belichick understands how to coach defensively.
Well, but Brian, the point I'm making is without a good quarterback, no great defensive coach is winning.
Chris,
he could be the greatest.
Again, we can go back and talk about 2 Super Bowls, and I'll talk about them forever. We can talk about the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl when they won.
But they weren't a dynasty.
It's not about a dynasty. It's about a defense that it almost didn't matter who you had at quarterback for that team, because the defense was a juggernaut. It's the same thing with Brad Johnson in Tampa Bay. That defense was so good, you could have plugged a number of quarterbacks in, and they could have been sufficient enough to get the job done.
But the point I'm making is to win a consistent win.
To have a dynasty, you need a quarterback. But I'm saying to win once. I mean, to win a year, to win a 2.
Look, I would take Trent Dilfer on the Jets if it meant they were going to win the Super Bowl.
Of course, but who wouldn't?
The point is, I don't think anyone's and Brian Billick was an offensive guy, which is hysterical, right? But he won with I'm blanking on his name. I can't believe the old Cincinnati, but Marvin Lewis. Right, Marvin Lewis was a defensive coordinator of those Ravens teams. Marvin Lewis had a pretty decent quarterback in USC guy. What the hell was his name? Carson Palmer. Pretty good quarterback. Not an elite quarterback. Couldn't get him over the hump, no matter how good defensively those Bengals teams were, and they were never in the.
Need for long haul. But I'm talking about if you want to win. And every season is a season to win. You don't look to win down the road. You look that year.
Well, that's the road the Raiders are going. They're looking to build something for the future.
And I'm always about trying to win right now, because there's no guarantee.
You as a Lions fan and me as a Jet fan.
There's no guarantee on a future. We've learned that over time.
I remember being the favorite in '99.
You don't look and say, hey, we're going to do this in the future. The future is always right now, because the NFL, the greatest cliche ever, not for long. You just do not know what is going to happen. A career-ending injury can happen on any given play. Now, granted, that could happen in any sport, but the NFL is way more prevalent for that kind of thing happening, and you have to try to win now. The Raiders, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, as far as what they were looking for out there when they realized they weren't going to go after Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady was retiring, that Jimmy Garoppolo was probably the best thing available to them for their style of football. But like Spencer said before I walked in the studio today, again, that it's kind of like you're replacing Derek Carr with more big game experience. And that's the way I look at it. And I think Derek Carr may have a better arm than Jimmy G.
Well, with Jimmy G, the question will always be, can he finish the season?
Yeah, and can he finish the season?
Derek Carr, outside of the one season where unfortunately for him, he broke his leg, going into the playoffs.
He's been durable.
He's a very and he's taken a beating.
I agree, but you can take all the beatings you want. You got to win football games. Real quickly, I want to move on because I want to get to the NCAA before we run out of time. I do want to say, as far as Aaron Rodgers goes, the Jets and Aaron Rodgers have been talking for weeks, as we know, and the Jets and the Packers are trying to find a compromise. This has been dating back to the Super Bowl. They've been talking that long. Some believe the Packers might just be holding out, trying to get a little more draft compensation in a potential trade. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, Rodgers was talking to free agents last week about playing for the Jets, so everything appears to be in motion for the most part. Right. They just have to find a sweet spot. The Packers have this $58 million option bonus for Rodgers that does not have to be exercised until week 1, so they can essentially hang on to that if they want for a long time. But the Jets are confident that they can remain a little patient here, and this will all sort itself out. There are no other teams reportedly to be involved, so kind of weird. It's kind of a weird standoff, but Rodgers will eventually be the Jets quarterback before the start of the 2023 season. I can almost assure you that. And, it's just a matter of getting this thing worked out. I just think the Packers don't want to say he's not our quarterback for as long as they possibly can, because no one is celebrating Bryce Love and saying this is going to be Jordan Love and saying this is going to be our future quarterback.
Well, we got to see a bit of Jordan Love. So
it's about, they have about as much confidence in Jordan Love as the 49ers do in the guy that's about to take the helm, unless their quarterback can get his elbow healthy. They're looking at a guy that no one's real excited about in San Francisco either. And it's the same type of thing. The guy did not look confident out there. Jordan Love was not making good passes when we've seen him play in the game. The decision making's not great.
I'll hold off reserve on Jordan Love until we actually see him. Until
we get a good sample size.
Yeah, look, coming in occasional situations and having to look over your shoulder and fully knowing that the job isn't yours. It's hard to say, but they seem to like him. And I don't.
Well, they better, Chris. He's going to be their quarterback this year. So
for how long we don't know, but
they better like him.
They're going to move Rodgers, and it's one of those weird things where nobody really has any leverage. So, the Jets know that the Packers have to get rid of Rodgers, and the Packers know that the Jets are
the team that they're going to get rid of too. It's just a matter of it's like I said, some compensation or something. It's going to happen, and I think immediately Aaron Rodgers changes the complexion of the New York Jets, their football team. This is a team that is on the brink of being good. And Eric Rodgers is a guy that if he can get rejuvenated going to New York and play with the capability he has still left in the tank, the Jets could be a really good team. The other guy right now that everyone's talking about, we'll go over this one quickly, but he's the second highest rated quarterback in the NFL in the past 4 seasons, behind only Patrick Mahomes. Who am I talking about? You're going to think maybe I'm talking about the guy up in Buffalo. You'd be wrong. Maybe you'd be thinking about talking to the guy in Cincinnati. You'd be wrong also. He hasn't even been in the league 4 years yet. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson, former NFL MVP. The problem is he's going to come at a cost of around $200 million and 2 first-round draft picks, and nobody really seems to want to deal with that. Plus, when you're dealing with Lamar Jackson, you don't talk to an agent who might have some sensibility and understands the game. You talk to Lamar Jackson himself, because he doesn't have an agent. He didn't sign off on his franchise tag, and so there's no firm offer sheet for him right now. Possible landing spots for Lamar Jackson. I'm doing a little bit of research, Chris. You can tell me what you think about this. If he doesn't end up back in Baltimore, which is still a distinct possibility. I mean, they somehow want to rectify this. I don't think it's going to happen. He can end up with the Indianapolis Colts if they don't get a QB in the draft who they're looking to potentially get. I think they got the 4th pick in the draft. They're looking at potentially that. Believe it or not, if, and this is a gigantic if, it's Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Jet, but if for some reason he wasn't, I think they would all of a sudden turn and look at Lamar Jackson potentially for them. The Tennessee Titans, they just cleared some cap space and have a new GM in Rand Carthen, who is working on a brand new roster. They might want a running quarterback for the type of offense that this guy is talking about. They're looking to run in Tennessee. And believe it or not, kind of a wild card, the Minnesota Vikings. It's kind of a long shot, but Kirk Cousins has 1 year left on his contract, and they could be looking to reestablish their identity there. And a guy like Lamar Jackson could come in and give them new life, because the Vikings, with all the wins they've got, it's a really good football team. I think, there's belief in Kirk Cousins, but he just doesn't seem like this is a guy that one day is going to, that's going to hold up a Super Bowl trophy. Where Lamar Jackson, you can see if this guy stays healthy all year and you find the right system for it, this guy could win at any level.
Yeah, it's funny because immediately when you started talking about Indianapolis Colts, jumped out at me. New coach in Shane Steichen, former UNLV quarterback Shane Steichen. Yep. That was the one that jumped out to me, right? Because Jalen Hurts, while obviously not the prolific runner that Lamar Jackson is, I think he had some success with a guy who has the capability to put the ball under his arm and go. Lamar Jackson is an elite quarterback when he's fully healthy. The problem is the style he plays. It's you don't know, and that's, for me as a Jet fan, that's the one holdup. Like if you ask me, like, who would I rather have for the future? I want Lamar Jackson. Much longer of a runway there. But the problem is, I just don't know how long Lamar Jackson's going to be in the league, because it's just that position. First of all, we talk about running quarterbacks are the same way. Like I am still to this day amazed how long Ben Roethlisberger was able to last in the NFL, because that guy, he was like a linebacker hitting you when he decided to run the ball. I mean, he took some massive hits.
He did, but you felt it when you hit him, though.
Yeah. And that's the thing. But like he had a very good career. It's not like Fran Tarkenton back in the 70s when, you were getting hit by guys who were the same size as Fran.
Yeah.
As a quarterback today, you're getting hit by guys the size of Mack trucks.
And they run like Mack trucks.
Yes, yeah. So, I think the upside is there with Lamar Jackson. I just, if you want to win now, and I think for the Colts, I think they're looking more long-term. But, man, the idea that you can sign him as the New York Jets and he'd be your quarterback probably for the next 5 or 6 years.
It's kind of intriguing.
It certainly is.
Believe me, as much as happy as I am with what Jared Goff was.
Oh, you would take Lamar Jackson in a minute.
It's tough. Right now, I would really struggle with it, because I want to see if the offensive line stays intact in Detroit. If Jared Goff, if this is him, I mean, he's a former number 1 overall draft pick, for God's sakes. If this is him, or if he'll go back to being what he was with the Rams towards the end, I don't know. But Jared Goff had a great year last year, and I can't believe right now I would hesitate in jumping on the Lamar Jackson bandwagon, just because, again, Chris, that running style quarterback, he is so it's a demolition derby with him, and that can always potentially be a problem. Plus, he has never been a perfectly accurate long passer. Jared Goff throws an accurate deep ball. Lamar Jackson is hit or miss with that at times. So I'm a little bit skeptical there. I do think Lamar Jackson is going to end up in Indianapolis Colts. That was why that was my first choice there. I think they are looking at the draft a little bit, but when I think they look at it and everything, again, Irsay's a guy who wants to win. He doesn't want to rebuild. He just wants to win. Yeah. And that's his type of mentality.
I still think I think at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson stays in Baltimore.
Very well could. I mean, they want him there. But I think my point is, if he does leave, that's
Indianapolis.
I think that seems the best fit for him right now. Guys, got to get to this NCAA tournament as we close out the show today. March Madness in full swing again. It's blowing my mind again. One of the things we've got to stop doing, and before we get to this, since this is part of today, go ahead and hit Fact This, Spence.
Fact this. If you don't like the facts, take your ass back to bed. Fact this.
The 15 seed Princeton Tigers beat the number 2 seed Arizona Wildcats Thursday, and the 7 seed Missouri Tigers yesterday fell to also yesterday, and to advance to the South regions, I should say, next week. This means that we need to stop talking so much about the consistency of 12 seeds beating 5 seeds in the opening round, and start talking about 15 seeds. Since Princeton's win, this makes it 3 years in a row that a 15 seed has now made it to the Sweet 16. And if you remember last year, St. Peter's went all the way to the Elite Eight. I guess you look at this, 4 15 seeds in history have made it, have gotten out of the first round, have won a game, or gone to the Sweet 16, I should say. 3 of them in the last 3 years, Princeton, St. Peter's, and in 2021, Oral Roberts. And then you go back to Florida Gulf Coast in 2013, also out of the 15 hole. What is the deal with 15 seeds? Are these seeds being underseeded?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think the reality is, and the committee, they have no clue what the hell they're doing. Like, I think they know, for the most part, the top 15, 20 teams in the country. After that, it's a crapshoot. Like it didn't get talked about, and it didn't matter. But how on earth did Auburn, as a 9 seed, get to play number 1 seed Houston in Birmingham, Alabama yesterday? But what pisses me off is, and this is why I say they have no clue once they get outside the top 20 teams, the 5-12, and I know you wanted to talk about it. The College of Charleston played San Diego State. College of Charleston was hovering around top 25 all season. A really good team, criminally underseeded as a 12 seed. They probably should have been a 10. Then you had the other side, Virginia Commonwealth and St. Mary's. VCU, a 12 seed out of the A10. The A10 was only a 1-bid league this year, which is really surprising because it's generally one of the better non-major conferences. You know, they've had some teams make deep runs, but what they do, and they didn't do it in all the 5-12s, but what they like to do is they like to put the non-majors against each other in that 5. They've gotten away from the Duke Oral Roberts, which was one. I can't remember what the other 5-12 was, but it doesn't matter. What they want these non-power schools to knock each other out so that they don't have to deal with. But as far as the 15 seats, they don't know what they're doing, because Princeton is a really good basketball team. The Ivy League, considering they don't give athletic scholarships, the Ivy League is a pretty good basketball team, because just in recent memory, we've seen Tommy Amaker with Harvard make a pretty good run.
I love when Pete Carell used to coach.
We saw Cornell make a Sweet 16 out of the Ivy recently, like a really good Cornell team, maybe about 10 years ago. Yep. And I think they lost to Davidson, who had Steph Curry. My memory might be foggy there, but Yale's won a game. The Ivy League never should be seeded at a 15. I don't care, because first of all, they have a conference tournament, but only the top 4 teams advance to their conference tournament. So if you're like 7th, you have 0 chance. So one of their top 4 teams is always going to be pretty good because it's a good league. They should never be in that 15 seed. I felt bad for Arizona when I saw them playing Princeton, because I knew that Princeton plays really good defense, and I knew that they're a really good rebounding team. They're not a 15 seed. They're probably an 11.
Well, it's really cool because Mitch Henderson, their coach, was a
played
4-year
for them
starter.
when they beat UCLA.
Yes. Back for the guy I just mentioned.
And I remember going to watch him play at Princeton, because I grew up like 35 minutes from the campus. So
it's pretty cool. And, he goes back in, Chris, and to your point, they beat them 78-63 was the final score they gave. It is the largest margin of victory ever for a 15 seed to win in that game, and
that
since
game,
the tournament expansion,
they were up by 21.
Yeah. It was never a ball game.
It was over at halftime.
Yeah, it was, and it's cool. And again, Princeton, you're talking about now they're going to play the winner of Baylor and Creighton,
because they could beat Creighton. But I don't think they'll beat Baylor.
It'll be tough.
Baylor's very athletic.
But you know what? When you believe like that, you never know what's going to happen. But I like that game. Speaking
of Baylor, you know who was getting props the other day? Former UNLV player. Was it Jonathan?
Jonathan. Chachua.
Yeah.
Yes, who played on the national championship team for Baylor. I remember him
Good
real
player.
quickly. I wanted to really quickly get this in because Eric Musselman, of course, will be here in Vegas on Thursday to bring his Arkansas Razorbacks, who knocked off the defending national champion Kansas Jayhawks last night. After the game, I just wanted Musselman was so excited. He takes his shirt off, which I love. It's been a thing of his forever. He gets so into it. Dick Vitale was ranting and raving about him this morning on ESPN before I came to the station. And this was Musselman after the game, after they won.
I would love to lie and say that, I felt composed. But But this, I mean, we only led for a minute 43. And this has been as challenging and up and down season as I've ever been a part of.
You know, and they were missing one of their best players for 19 games this season, a big part of the reason that Arkansas. But Musselman is a great coach. Last year knocked off the #1 seed Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. Eric Musselman, man, expect him at a bigger time university in the future. Listen,
I think he's cool at Arkansas.
He could be. He loves it there. I got a game starting here in just a few minutes. Pittsburgh Xavier tips off at 9:10 this morning.
Go Panthers.
Go MSU, man. My Michigan State Spartans against Marquette. 2:15 today. Listen, we're out of time. We'll be back next week. This is Out of Line. We're here every Sunday morning, 8 to 9 a.m. on Fox Sports Radio. Want to thank Spencer the Wiz Ostrowski for handling everything on the video side. And, of course, our producer, Chris Magnum Chapman. I'm Brian Feldman. I'm out. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.